No, thank you very much for that, Hashi. I want to move on to audience discussion questions. I've got a couple that's come through on my phone, but I've got one on the chat box, which is saying, loving the discussion around how to choose best candidate for the job. Can Hashi give some examples of what more meaningful metrics might be?
Yes, of course. I mean, so one of the ways I always tell people is, for example, don't think so much about the metrics of how do I measure this candidate against another one with a view to changing the whole system, and then I will then be able to help that person succeed. Rather, what you need to do, in my judgment, is think about how your whole interviewing process is set up, and then think about how it might then give an advantage to somebody else in a way that you just can't appreciate or you don't see. One example in the legal profession, as a barrister, when you go for a barrister's chambers interview, you are interviewed by a panel of interviewees. You are interviewed by people who might be your potential supervisors, who will train you when you become a barrister. And you will also be moving around different seats in terms of your year training, your 9 months training. Now, it isn't lost on anyone who basically slightly understand how the system works that the system that you have when you're going to a public school in a place like Eton, where you belong to your house and then you're going to your school, mirrors the same system that when you get to an Oxbridge college, you belong to your college and then your faculty. Then you get to a place like the bar as a barrister, you belong to your chambers and then you belong to your Middle Temple or Inn. You're running from one quad of manicured lawns at your public school to the next, as compared to when you're running from the same manicured lawn to the next when you're in an Oxbridge college, to the next manicured lawn quad when you end up at the bar being supervised in the same way that you were being supervised at public school, in the same way that you were being supervised at your Oxbridge college, and in the same way that you're being supervised now that you're a barrister. So is it any wonder, therefore, that the system as it's set up, clearly, when you get to the employment stage, is not a system that somebody who went to a normal school, grew up in normal set of circumstances like the rest of us, who might have gone to a Russell Group university or a polytechnic, how are they supposed to understand how these systems work? How are they supposed to understand the kind of nuances and the unwritten rules and the way in which people speak and communicate and make references? That is an example of how you are set up as an interviewing system as a whole is already advantaging people before they have even opened their mouths, before they've even sat at the table where they're about to be interviewed. They're at a deficit. That's a classic example. And I can give you many more examples in different settings, in the literary world, in every other sector, but we'd be here all day.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah. So, Box, but this question is about resilience, and is that a key attribute that employers should be looking for?
Absolutely, because I always say, when you look at the potential, for example, for people who have grown up, in an environment whereby, you've gone through a lot and you've succeeded, you've done well, you've pushed forward. That is a huge amount of resilience, And that is a quality that you should be able to pass on. And that's something that an employer should recognize. That's something that an employer should push forward and actually attach a huge amount of credence, in the same way that you might attach somebody's degree, in the same way that you might attach somebody's other qualities, resilience is a big part of the picture, absolutely.
Is that something that and just on that, how is that found in an interview process? For example, you mentioned about interviews being a key part of it. Is that something that you'd see, for example, where you've got an individual coming from a deprived background, but they've got the AAAs or the is that something that you'd see in that setting, or are there certain areas?
You'd see it. You should see it in the kind of schools they went to. You should see it in the kind of environment they grew up in. You should see it in their personal statements. You should see it in their extracurricular activities. You should see it in various places. And it's not just about the kind of grades that they get.
Yeah, I think we've just had that. It's not only about So somebody would agree, say it's not only about their grades. Just wondering if we start internally around diversity inclusion, does that necessarily mean that the external things around recruitment improve, or
No,
is that a separate factor?
I think it's both. I think I often say it has to be something that starts right at the top. It has to start right at the top. There's no point in getting an email or an invitation from the head of diversity and inclusion telling me, oh, can you come along and speak to our staff? Well, I'm like, well, yeah, sure, I can. You're going to pay me to come and speak to you. But by the way, you should probably get hold of your head of managing partner to come along and listen to what I have to say. Because at the end of the day, if your managing partner isn't listening, then nothing is going to change internally. Whatever I've got to say is not going to mean anything.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I agree. Internally is stuff, but externally is just as important.
Yeah, I agree there. Emma asks, what was Hashi's experience, career? What was Hashi's experience, careers advice? So, as if Hashi says, education. What role does your careers guidance plays in promoting social mobility?
It's a very good question. My experience of career advice is I had none. I didn't have any career advice. The truth is, I think from the age of about 19, 20, I had a pretty good idea of what I want to do and how I was going to do it. And I am very, very lucky that everything that I wanted to pursue in exactly the way I wanted to pursue it came to be realized. So I had very little career guidance, if I'm honest. I think probably the best career advice I had was in my second year of undergrad. The head of careers was speaking to my French teacher in the corridor at university, and she said, and she was, I think the French teacher was telling the career advice woman who they were very friends with, she was like, oh, Hashi's learning French very, very quickly. I'm really happy with that, blah, blah, blah. And then apparently the careers advice teacher said, well, you should then send him to a year in France to then make it even better so that when he comes back, he's even more employable. And I think that was probably the best career advice I ever had, because when I went to France and I picked up the French language and I came back, it has made a massive difference, both in terms of career-wise. I think definitely made a difference because I got a job at the BBC because of the French, but also because of the way I think, what I've been exposed to, the world that I now know more about in the French language, definitely made a massive difference.
Oh, that's fantastic. So following recruitment, I've got a question here from Sarah, which is, following recruitment, do you have any ideas about support whilst in post? So it says we're keen to ensure all individuals are supported throughout. So this is probably after the recruitment process, after they've come in and they're now in post.
Very good question. Very good question, because I really, really spent a lot of time on this in the book, because one of the things I'm really keen on raising is that we have made a lot of progress in relation to recruitment and the starting point. We've done a lot in terms of how do we get people in, how do we get recruiting in a more diverse workforce. But actually, I think we've dropped the ball, or at the very least, we're not keeping an eye on the ball in relation to retention and progression. And I think that that is the next real fault line, in that people might get in, but actually they're blocked from the opportunities to progress, the opportunities to get into more senior positions, the opportunities to get into the managing positions. And I think that that is the next big challenge for all of us.
Thank you for that. So, talking about level playing fields, and it says often rejected and that unequal starting points exists, therefore expose unconscious bias. So I think the question here is around finding the equal level playing fields when it comes to recruiting from disadvantaged backgrounds. How can organizations actually establish themselves or find a footing in finding that level playing field?
So in terms of of them trying to actually improve their systems, is that what it means?
Yeah.
I mean, I just think you have to start strong and start early, and it has to be with the leadership. It can't be just the sort of tinkering around the edges based on the HR department. I think if you're serious about making a difference, then it has to start from the top. It can't be the tinkering away at the lower levels, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, I think I think that's sort of where that point was going. What is the role models for individuals from the top to the bottom and bottom to top? So that's probably around about, I think, probably internally.
Yeah, I mean, I think role models, it just depends what you're looking for. I mean, I've never really believed in role models. I've always believed in, my grandmother's a role model, my mum's a role model. I mean, I look for the values. I don't look for my role model is this barrister who did this, that. No, I'm more interested in, is this somebody who has the kind of value system that I can buy into? Is this somebody who I can buy into in terms of understanding who they are and what they're driven by? And I think people often get too bogged down into what a role model is. I always say to them, don't call me a role model. I'm not a role model. I'm just somebody who is working hard to make sure that I don't mess it up. And I'm just as fallible as anyone else. I'm just as prone to mistakes as anyone else. And I'm living my life trying to do my best. And so don't read into that any more than that. And so just do what you need to do with your own life. And if I can inspire you in some way, great. If you find inspiration somewhere else, also great. So I think it's important that we don't try and do too much when it comes to this whole role model idea, because I think you just put too much pressure on yourself and others.
Thank you for that. I've got a question around. Sorry.
I'm looking at the questions as well myself now as well.
No, I've got something that's come through on this on my phone as well. So we've got a question around marketing, which is an interesting angle. Does having diverse faces and or a diverse, and this probably connects to that role model, does having diverse faces on marketing always work?
Marketing, and yeah, of course it works. Marketing is more about just bringing to the attention of people, bringing to the attention of people things that they may not have already been aware of. So I think that's where it helps, because I think that so many young people that I come across who have the enormous amount of talent, often not so much anymore now if they know what they're looking for, but often would not be able to find the scholarships that are available, the money that's been given away. Interestingly, since, a lot of people have been sending me letters recently, and they send me letters and say, by the way, I run this charity or I run this social enterprise, and we give out £300,000 a year, every year, towards kids who want to learn more about the outdoors. The funding is available. If you know anyone or an organization that wants to apply for this funding, please put them in touch. And then you realize just how much money there is out there and that's available for people if only they knew where they were looking for. And I think that's where the marketing part comes in, to just raise more awareness and to give more opportunities to people to know.
So that's fantastic. Thank you for the Hashi.